Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Could I get anyone to volunteer as a designated note taker for today?
I can do it.
Oh, thank you very much. Um, let's see. Any new faces? I don't see any new faces. So I think we can hop right into the RFCs. First up, we have proposed that YJ binary is removed from stack. I think that this is actually ready to merge. Um, and I think that that can be handled by stack maintainers entirely. Am I correct in that?
I
Cool.
think you're right.
In that case, then I think that we can move on. Next up, we have decoupled dependencies. Jan, I think you and I are going to talk about this for a little bit, so I might skip over that and go to multi-arch really quickly.
Yeah.
So that we don't eat up all the time. Multi-arch. Jericho. Are there any questions or feedback that you have?
No, somebody, I can't remember who it was asking me to kind of create more of a proof of concept where I actually implement some of this stuff. I have not had time to do this. I'm also wondering if I do that, it's kind of already doing the work. So I'm happy to do that. And that's basically like a proof of concept you can use and, if you like it, merge it. But I was waiting to get some input on, is that what I should be doing? Or do you want to approve this RFC and then the steering committee decides how they want to implement this?
So full transparency, I reached out to both Rob and Dan McCuza today. I've just been busy, and I'll be honest, I forgot to reach out to them earlier. And Rob, I don't know, you've been out for a little while, so I haven't had a chance to go back and re-review any of this. And Dan mentioned that he would like to take another look at this, but yeah, I don't know that I don't know necessarily what needs to happen out of this. I think that Dan mentioned he wanted to potentially look into making parts of it more actionable. But I don't want to speak for him because he's not here. So it might be worth you reaching out to him and seeing if there's anything that he's looking for. I think that it was Anthony who was talking about potentially looking for more of a proof of concept. I can reach out to him, or I mean, you can feel free to reach out to him and ask if not having that proof of concept is a deal breaker. I can see your hesitance to kind of just implement the thing and then have someone go, oh, actually, we don't want this, and then you've basically implemented it and for nothing. Yeah, I guess I would just be curious exactly what he was looking for to get him over the edge on this. But yeah, I think that hopefully just some more reviews will come out of this soon, and either we'll merge or we'll find out what the actionable piece is for this.
Okay, cool.
But I can message you after this, and it's Anthony. I don't remember his last name right now, unfortunately. So I can't tell you how to reach out to him on Slack, but I will find it out real quick.
That's fine. Yeah, no, I mean, I think I can look back at the previous notes.
Awesome.
No worries. Yeah, and I also have not been able to attend all of the meetings, so I think it's been kind of, like trying to get everybody together in in a room or whatever to make a decision and decide what to do. So yeah, I do appreciate that. I don't want to put in, I want to contribute, but if you're not going to use it, then I don't want to contribute.
For sure. If you would like to actually have a more comprehensive discussion with like a larger group of people, or at least the stakeholders that have made themselves known in this discussion, we could potentially talk about putting together an ad hoc meeting of like yourself, Rob, Anthony, and Dan, and just like doing that at a time that Dan would be able to attend,
Yeah.
and see if y'all can have a discussion about that. I can I can mediate setting that up if that would be beneficial to you.
That would be fabulous. If you could help me with that, that would be greatly appreciated.
All right. Yeah. In that case, I'll probably just put something in like a message in core dev or something like that after this, just pinging everyone individually. Let me write that down, otherwise I'll forget about it.
Thank you.
Is there anything else that you'd like to talk about on this?
No, I'm good.
In that case, then we can go back to decoupled dependencies. I was able to finally get a little bit of time in my day to read through your feedback that you had, Jan. If I could, I guess, sum it up to you and then the larger audience, and then you can give critiques on that sum up. I think the general idea of what your big pushback for this is it feels a little too specific to be like sort of a low effort or low contact interface for people to like to implement kind of any way that they see fit. Your concern seems to me that we kind of lay out a little bit too much implementation detail and a little bit too much like this library needs to do X, Y, or Z, when that's not necessary for defining the interface of these decoupled dependencies logic. We could instead define it and then develop either styling or come back with further RFCs to sort of codify or specify it or whatever you want to call it in terms of things that we need. Does that sound approximately like the feedback you were giving?
Yeah, I guess it's like it looks a bit too specific for too many unclarities that are actually still there, right? So for me, it sounds like what we can decide as a community is, do we want to go for a way where Paketo, Buildpacks, and the dependencies they ship are somehow disentangled and delivered separately, so there are some rooms, and then that actually the endeavor starts if we want to go that way, right? In kind of even finding out what use cases get enabled by that. And for that, it's a pretty specific format already. And I guess I had some concrete points with some minor details of that concrete format as well. I tried to already get some more responses in. So yeah, I think that's the basic point, to get like to kind of give more freedom to whatever the implementation will look like, and more decide on the broader scope of, do we want that? Do we see that there's value in separating dependencies out of the individual Buildpack tomls, and then like all these, like the reasoning for why we would do that sounds really appealing, right? That it's not like we have like the whole release cadence, like that one gets bombed and then another one and then another one, but rather could see, I don't know what, Buildpacks that only release a new version every 4 weeks because there's just no change other than the dependencies. So that's all sounds very, very solid. And then I just feel like it's like, probably it's because this has been boiling in Dan's head already for a year, I guess. That's why it went to be very specific also in these details, like it is a reverse domain name, file system, folder structure, and whatnot, right? These things that I think we don't need to formulate them that specific at the RFC. Even if the exploration work just starts with whatever he proposed, it doesn't need to be part of the RFC for kicking off these efforts. That was my feeling.
I think I agree with some of your larger sentiments in here. I think like stuff like defining like, oh yeah, we'll have a Buildpack toml structure that allows us to restrict the version lines, probably doesn't need to be defined in this RFC. It's probably something that we'll implement, and then we can either write that out as like best practice or as like another separate specification, like we just sort of evolve what the Buildpack toml looks like, but I don't know that it needs to be part of this. I am a little hesitant removing removing something like the reverse domain name structure and like I mean, I'd be willing to quibble. You know, we could bike shed like everything in this particular section. And if we want to do that, we can. I'm a little more reluctant to sort of like get rid of the idea of like, we have a reverse domain name structure. It has this type of file structure and it appears at this place by default, but can be manipulated by an environment variable. Because in my head, those are the smallest touch points that we need to actually define an interface to begin implementation. And I think that if we wanted to do something else, like I think that there's lots of implementation underneath that we could continue, like how we actually deliver the metadata, at what cadence, how do we package it with the rest of the language family. I think that that's all stuff that would be valid and worth talking about. But I think that what concerns me about getting rid of some of the more foundational chunks, like basically the interface as it stands, is that we then don't have any interface to begin to build on for an implementation.
That one specifically, I responded. I guess like the properties that are currently in the Buildpack toml, I've just taken for granted. Of course, that's the interface to start with, like how are dependencies described. So we are just like the RFC is about relocating that information, right? So that's the bundle of information. And then I think there are two thoughts in there already to add like architecture and others that are currently not in the Buildpack toml, but sound like sanely to be done, right? In conjunction with there's work to go for multi-architecture stuff. So it's more about what I wouldn't define is where to exactly put it. Let's just bring up one use case, right? If we would consider the use case where there are some users that have a problem with a particular set of version bumps, and by that they actually want to control the metadata to not do that version bump right now. It's going to be the easiest if such a user could provide one file that has 3 unrelated dependencies, like a Tomcat and a Java and something else, just in one file, instead of forcing them to start mounting multiple volumes in the pack build command, right? Just because the structure demands that these files come from entirely different files or folders, right? That's the concern I had there. There could be a use case that where this really gets detrimental if you enforce such a structure. That was one of the thoughts.
Okay, so you're the quibble that you have more is with this reverse domain structure setting up but like something like having a default platform to mount it at, and then also having a way to modify where you would search. That's fine.
I commented that on the whole section because the example is actually a single toml file. I mean, you can't see it easily, but it's defined as a single file. That's why I marked the whole block. But like the content of what a version of what a dependency version looks like, I guess that's just given by what we currently have. So yes, it was about the structure.
Okay.
And the other, like, I guess it was driven by looking at some of the potential use cases that might be worth exploring. Similarly, if you want to look into something about like similar to offline build packs, right, where you actually ship metadata and assets, I think it might end up to be detrimental if we completely separate those into 2 different mounted volumes, one for metadata, one for assets, instead of allowing me to just package up the metadata for a Tomcat plus the Tomcat and just mount that in a pack build command.
I don't necessarily disagree with that idea either. I guess without something, so I think that it's perfectly salient to have or like I think it's okay to have an issue with the reverse domain name file structure output. I think that's if you want to have a qualm with that, you can have a qualm with that. I'm concerned about sort of putting it aside for the initial implementation, because it means that we either have to support an incredibly wide number of ways of obtaining the metadata, right? So like let's say that we ignore this, and then as a group we decide that we actually do want to use this particular, we want to use this, or we would like to go to it because we feel X, Y, Z, but we haven't specified it initially. And we have people that build that without that specification. we then have to set up some sort of deprecation period for that, or enforcing a new specification that would allow us to do that, or support multiple ways of doing this, right? So like I guess a way of doing it, like ID is a optional field, and you search for a top level metadata package, and if it has IDs you reference off that, but if it doesn't, then you search the ID field that you would in the like it gets kind of complicated the more paths we have to support after the initial implementation.
It's like I guess one thing I could imagine as an alternative is if you allow the structure in the TOML file, getting out of this could be easy, right? By saying you can also leave out some of the structuring and leave the structuring to the folder structure, and by that actually have a compatible path. But yeah, it's like you need to start somewhere. That's true. That's what I meant with maybe the start of the exploration is actually exactly what's written here. The problem I see is by already kind of fixating that in the RFC as that's what we are going to look for. So it's going to be harder to actually discover, oh, let's do it differently in an exploration.
Okay.
But yeah, it's like I don't have necessarily very specific things in mind because we did not start exploring anything on that. So it's not that I have some kind of POC ready, right? That shows this should be done this way. So I don't have too strong feelings about most of my comments. It just generally seems to be more specific than necessary. Mm-hmm. But you're right, we shouldn't be less specific than necessary either.
Yeah. Okay. I think that this goes back to like one of the original pieces of feedback you had, which would be allowing a flattened TOML structure. It could be interesting.
It's like I actually like I wouldn't propose that we need to do that, but that would be one of the things I might be inclined to explore, right? Because but I would actually start to explore use cases, right? I might look into concretely how would that look like if we wanted to have offline build packs with this mechanism, then really just try that out end to end. That's why I think not too many constraints are needed, because it wouldn't be two different groups working against an agreed upon interface, but rather one group and taking the end-to-end scenario, right? Taking a build pack that does install dependencies, wrapping that in a builder that provides the dependencies, and just have a look how that looks like, so to say, right? And then you don't need the specific interface because you don't really encode against something that somebody else is also working.
Sure.
That's maybe for a mode of exploration that I would probably trigger here, but that might not be everyone's feeling either. So
I'm just trying to think this through. I think that my concern comes with the idea of like putting something out that is like a supported interface, because if you don't have a potential set of implementations in mind, and the API isn't quite controlled enough, you can end up with a bunch of divergent things that cause issues. Mm-hmm. Maybe we get away with this by stating that until some point we deem this feature experimental, and any changes to it are subject to be as capricious as we want them to be and as not backwards compatible as we want them to be, until at which some point we open another RFC to say, hey, this is actually what the stability of this API has looked like now that we've done sufficient end-to-end integration on this. And if you want to build a stable version and not have to read every RFC that potentially comes out or read every commit that comes out about this, then just chill out until we have it figured out. So like making it, I guess, experimental is maybe a way of getting around that.
What one concrete thing I've seen with the folder structure was, and I might be wrong, but with com example dep A and com I don't know what SAP dep A and something else, I'm not even sure if we will be able to mount multiple things into that.
Yeah, so
providing multiple things that share part of that folder structure. I guess that was my strongest feeling on the original comment on this.
Yeah, I think that that's a fair thing that I was thinking about as well. Like that, I knew. I mean, I saw yours, so I didn't necessarily feel your feedback. So I was like, maybe going back and adding some things that I've been thinking about can wait a little bit. But like, yeah, changing the environment variable to actually be a path environment variable as opposed to like a list path, so that you would have like a lookup path like you would normally. Be like, can I find it in this? If I find it in one of those, then great. That way you can just sort of append as you add things or as you mount things or whatever.
I had a thought here. So if you were to use like the same interface and data structure for this reverse domain setup, and then if you had a flat TOML file and they both read in and fed the same kind of data structure, wouldn't that let you say, okay, like I'm either using the reverse engineer path or I'm using this flat TOML file? Either way, you're going to be getting to the same data.
For sure. I don't necessarily know that that's unreasonable, but you know, if it comes down to the idea that everyone actually just wants to use a flat file, or a series of flat files, as I probably guess it would be, you'd have to find some way to merge those. Then, you know, like that would be that would be like, why bother with having the other format?
I guess what I'm saying is if the reverse engineer folder structure creates the flat file on the fly, if you will, like it reads all those files in and then it populates one struct, and it puts, you know, a list of all the things it finds in there, then you could then let people choose, you know, like users choose, I prefer the reverse domain setup, or I prefer this flat file setup. And then you could see, you know, like usage wise, what is preferred, because, you know, you might find people actually one better than the other. I'm just trying to think out loud. You know, I think there are valid points on both sides, and it's hard to really know how painful it's going to be either way until you start doing it. But if you basically allow both to happen at the same time using the same structure, it shouldn't be a problem. I'm just thinking
good point. If the global structure, right, there's one structure and that just also needs some kind of, right, the dependency has some kind of namespacing in there, so it needs that. Because definitely on the provider side, I would probably prefer some kind of folder structure instead of having a TOML file that has 10,000 lines or whatever. So definitely on the provider side, as like Paketo, we produce a set of dependencies, or even for us, for the providing side there, I mainly see the put it in a single file use case as when you want to allow users to overwrite something. Then it's be much more easy for them to do that by just passing in some rather simple things.
Yeah,
I like the idea to actually say it, but basically both just lead to the same global structure. It's just a different representation of it.
but I think that goes to what you were saying in terms of potentially abandoning this as part of that abandoning the structure idea entirely and just saying, hey, this metadata file now just doesn't exist in the same place that it now exists here instead, in this folder or whatever, and it can be mounted or however you want to say it, right? And whatever it might be. Maybe doesn't need to be decided right now, but needs to be decided when we actually have implementations. Okay, I think that's an interesting idea to drill down on.
I just had a thought about the multi-arch RFC and this one. And I don't know what you guys are thinking, but I almost feel like multi-arch RFC should just be approved before this one, because this one seems like it's going to require more changes, and it would probably be easier to implement multi-arch RFC in the existing TOML file, get used to it, and then you decide how do you, how you want to split it out with this. I feel like if you're trying to do both at the same time, I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong here, but it seems like it'd just be easier to do one than the other.
I don't know that they're actually 100% contingent on each other. I think that there's obviously like this overlap of adding these new like distro and Arch and Linux fields, but or not Linux, excuse me, fields. But I think that this would like these would just like mirror each other. So like if this one came out first and then the multi-arch one came out first, we would just like we could maybe even be like, I don't know, this is like almost a problem where us not having a spec kind of, even though I don't know that I would ever want to create a spec for this, is kind of a pain. Like we don't have a definition for what the standard for a build pack metadata dependency metadata looks like, or like this is how this would look, and it kind of takes into account what like Arch versus non like multi-arch would look like, or at least being able to distinguish between them.
Yep.
But I don't know if that's sufficient. So I understand what you're saying, and I think that it would just require either a back like a back port or something else for this.
But I guess what I'm saying is this. I think in terms of what is important for a user, it's much more important for me to get multi-arch support than it is for you to get your dependencies fixed and make it easier for you to build your buildbacks. So I'm just trying to say, like, priority wise, I really want multi-arch. I don't. This I understand we need to do. The multi-arch is more important, I feel like. So if you were to prioritize, unless it just comes along quickly and easily, I'm just trying to put that out there. Like I'm happy to work towards the multi-arch stuff, but if it gets sucked into a bigger project, and then that's going to take a lot of planning to go and change. I'm just trying to kind of like think about that and put that out there.
I would say we should try not to build a dependency in either direction for those. But I tend to agree this might be a larger effort than the multi-arch is, although I haven't looked into the details, so maybe that's also quite some things to consider and work on. So I tend to agree. But I think there's no real hard dependency on it. I don't think that anything can happen in this work stream, so to say, that will block you from shipping multi-arch. But I agree that we should make sure that this is the case.
I think at the end of the day, the goal, it will always be to always keep shipping the build packs no matter what, and whether or not that is like, and so with like the latest feature set that we can get in. And so I don't know that, like, even if this did turn out to be a large piece of work, I don't know that it would ever be a blocking piece of work against adding something else like multi-arch.
Yeah.
Or I would hope that we would at least design the workflow that it wouldn't be.
Yeah, I fully agree. And for what it's worth, I think this has a compatibility provision that Buildpacks can choose when they start not using Buildpack Toml, but instead this new mechanism. So any particular Buildpack could actually even just keep Buildpack Toml for a while.
It'd be interesting to, remember there's a few libraries out there that are reading that Buildpack Toml and are parsing that metadata as well today. So any changes to that will have to be reflected in probably Packet and libpack at least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Quick dumb go question. Does that mean that do those changes get ignored if they're not part of like the struct that you're importing into, or will it fail? Yeah, it will get ignored.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just doesn't pick it up as data. I think that I now have a better understanding of where what the concerns you have are. I don't know that I have a good solution or a good particular rewrite. So I think that I will have to think about this and probably talk to some people about it. just to try and figure out like what's the best way for us to do this. But yeah, I'm glad to understand more of your concerns.
Sounds good.
Is there anything else that people would like to talk about on this? All right, I think that means we've made it all the way through our RFCs. So we can get into the rest of our agenda. I don't have any C&B updates. I haven't seen anything big in terms of upstream changes. I don't have any project updates, I don't think. Yeah, I don't have any. The only discussion / open mic topic is I will be out on vacation next week during the time that this working group meeting happens, which I believe is the 5th. I would love if someone would be willing to run this meeting. Otherwise, you will be stranded and alone. But other than that, I think that's all that we have on the agenda for right now.
Cool. I was gonna say, does that have to be run by somebody, at VMware, like whoever joins can just run it and call it a day?
The second you log into this meeting, it starts recording. And when everyone leaves, it stops.
Okay. Yeah, I have to check my calendar if I'm gonna be around, but if I'm here, I'm happy to run it.
Be great. Thank you. All right, anything else? All right. I'll see y'all not next week, but the week after.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.